let's use even a smaller figure. Let's go 20 to 30,000 kids in the continental United States right now who have been lied to, deceived by their parents, by their doctors, by their teachers, by their governments, by every single authority in the world, has deceived them and lied to them and fed them drugs, or perhaps encouraged them to mutilate their bodies. And they wake up one day and they find out that they're in a worse place than they were before, and they're nihilistic and they have nothing to live for, and they live in a country where they can get a gun.
Hello and welcome to the Will Spencer Podcast. This is a weekly interview show where I sit down and talk with authors, thought leaders, and influencers who help us understand our changing world. New episodes release every Friday. My guest this week is Jason Mironchuck. Jason is the creator, producer, and host of Mironchuck Now, a channel devoted to challenging political and social narratives while questioning commonly held liberal priors. His shows include At the End of the Day, Mironchuck Live, and Then and Now with Jim Jatras. Jason was born in Montreal, Canada, where he lived for most of his life, but he moved his wife and daughter to southwestern Australia 4 years ago. During that time, he began to inquire into Eastern Orthodoxy and recently has started his catechism at a local Rocor parish. While still new to the faith, Orthodox Christianity has been the primary motivator and inspiration for many of Jason's theories and predictions, especially in his examination of the spirit of this new age, which he has named the Vengeful Son. Jason Mironchuck, welcome back to the Will Spencer Podcast.
Thank you, Will. Nice to be here.
It's definitely, it's a pleasure to be speaking to you again, and I'm excited to dig into the Vengeful Son hypothesis a bit more. We touched on it quite a bit in our live stream. I forget how long ago that was now. So it's a pleasure to be talking to you. I wish we didn't have to talk about this as much as we do, but since it's really up right now, I think it's time that everyone hear a bit more about it.
It's a weird prediction because it's one of those where you kind of want to be wrong. You know, I've made a few number of predictions and analysis over the last 2-3 years. My batting average is pretty good. And if I may say so myself, this is not prideful. It just happens to be that way. This was one of them where I'm like, I'd like to be wrong on this. This would be a good one to be completely wrong on. But yeah. I think the events of the last few weeks, especially, have proven that that I'm closer to the mark than off of it. So, so we'll have to examine all of that and the implications for the immediate future. I'd just like to make 2 disclaimers before we get into the show. One, as you mentioned in the start, I have started my catechism into the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. So as an Orthodox Christian, I'd like to just let everyone know that I am not speaking here on behalf of the church. That is above my pay grade, and I am here. So a lot of the ideas and these theories and things I'm going to express today come from me and me alone. I don't want them to be connected in any way to the church. Of course, we're going to be speaking broadly about religion and Christianity, but it's down to my understanding and my ability to speak on these issues. So I just don't want anyone thinking that it's some sort of canonical statement from the church. And the other is that I respect Will's intelligence. I know he's a very intelligent man. I know some people who pay attention to his show, at least, who are also very intelligent people. So I'm going to extend that assumption to the rest of the audience. We're going to have to speak in some generalities here. It's just, we're past the point of minutia debates. I feel that that time is now long past. We could get into examining every single qualifier or exemption or particularity, and this would turn into a 10-hour talk. So we're going to speak in some generalities, and hopefully the audience will bear with. And if you have any questions or want any more follow-ups, you can always message me, find me on X. I'm pretty easy to find. So.
Yeah, I appreciate both of those. I'm not here representing Presbyterianism or the CREC denomination. Like, we're here as just Jason and Will talking about what's going on in our world, meeting as Christian brothers and talking about what's going on with young men today. And so I appreciate you saying both of those so that people can join us in this discussion without hanging back and looking for particulars, etc.
I can always hear the clicking of the keyboard somewhere in the background. Like, and you didn't mention that. I'm like, yes,
yeah. Exactly. You can write that exception out for us. We're going to speak in some generalities, so we can all go about our lives without talking for 10 hours. Okay, so let's start with this Vengeful Son hypothesis, because I remember in the live stream we talked a little bit more about your background and how you ended up in Western Australia. So I would refer people who want to know more about you and sort of your origin story to that episode. But let's talk about the Vengeful Son hypothesis, maybe bring people up to speed on where it came from, some of the moving parts, and then we'll bring it up to today.
In late 2023, I started to think a lot more about the spirit of the ages, that kind of concept, because it felt like we were transitioning even at that point from one age to another. And as my friend and fellow podcaster Matthew Erickson over on King Pill podcast has said, is we are living in sort of a luminous age, or a luminous period, where potentialities are all kind of floating around. Nothing is really nothing has weight to it yet. Like, things are happening, but we don't know exactly where they're going to lead. So in that examination of saying, okay, what is going to be the more, let's say, meta archetype or spirit of this coming age, I started looking around mostly the circles that I was kind of more or less involved with. You could call them the dissident right, or more, let's say liberal criticisms, right? So in those groups, what I started noticing and what I started picking up more and more, not just even in those groups, but even from liberal groups, is a sense of anger and resentment. At first, you see them targeting boomers, but that resentment is basically growing to encompass the entirety of the 20th century.
Yeah.
So when we talk about red pills, I know your audience, you've talked about the red pill, the manosphere kind of movement. I first heard hearing red pills from the Curtis Yarvin kind of perspective, and the sort of the neo-reactionaries, which means you take that red pill and you start to understand that you've been lied to. And you ask, well, what have I been lied to? And you go, oh, everything. The entire swaths of histories are based on massive lies and deceits and deceptions and betrayals. And what happened to a lot of us for the last, let's say, 5 years coming out of COVID is a lot of us took that red pill, but because of how the ecosystems were done on social media, you couldn't say much publicly. Everything was done in like private or coded language, and you kind of had to vent all this anger and frustration out in certain ways, but it was all online, and it was all, you go through your different stages of acceptance, of anger, acceptance, sadness, all the rest of it.
Right.
And then you come out the other end. What's happening right now, and we're starting to see this, it really pinpointed me in the last year or so with guys like Daryl Cooper, and I'm not critical of Daryl Cooper or what he's doing, questioning the Nuremberg narrative and a lot of those other things, but that's a red pill, right? And he's red pilling entire generations of people very, very quickly. The situation on the ground where people are starting to become more aware that they're not safe, and that the life that they thought they had, or the system that they thought they had that was working for them, is now openly working against them. And it's not just white people, or just not just Americans. It's across the West. We're seeing what's happening in the UK, France, Europe, in many other places, Canada. People are now becoming red pilled in that sense of awareness that something is wrong, drastically wrong. And they're looking for answers, and they're getting angry because now, as they start to investigate these things and these occurrences, they start to see where all these lies and deceits and betrayals are coming from, or they at least will attribute that to those things. That's the spirit of the Vengeful Son. It's a spirit of resentment. It's a spirit of a sudden awareness that things are wrong, that this liberal frame, which we can get into, is Luciferian. It is inverted our virtues and has exalted our passions to such a point that it has basically been destroying churches and destroying countries and destroying entire systems of humanity, or even our status of image bearer now is being threatened. So that spirit, which I believe still is linked to that Luciferian core, that we can say, going from the revolutionary spirit to, let's say, the tyrannical father spirit of the early 20th century, giving way to the devouring mother spirit of the 1960s until very recently. And now we have the vengeful son, which is going to be a spirit of vengeance, of resentment, of anger, and a desire not to build things or change things or even control things, but burn it down, destroy it all.
Oh, I love that, because it seems very true. It fits very much with the research that I've done, but and maybe this is just my own bad memory, but I don't recall in our first conversation you connecting the tyrannical father to his antecedent, which is the revolutionary spirit. That the revolutionary spirit turned to produce a tyrannical father, which produced the reaction of the devouring mother, which produced the reaction of the vengeful son. And what's interesting about that is that the vengeful son is the only one with the real power to destroy everything and tear it down. The tyrannical father was fundamentally conservative. I don't mean this in a political sense. The tyrannical father wasn't about to destroy civilization. The devouring mother doesn't have the physical power, the kinetic power to destroy civilizations, particularly not against men or not without men anyway. But the vengeful son does have the ability through testosterone and bronze exceeding brains perhaps to actually cause some real damage. But I don't remember you tracing it back to the revolutionary spirit that started the wave in the first place, and I think that's really right.
I've been slowly developing the idea even further past the initial point. So in my examinations, and this is going back a few years now, I started saying to people on my show, I want to break your frame. I'm going to break your liberal frame, because originally back in 2020, when I started to become aware, one, I had a spiritual awakening, so that kind of took a veil off. It started me on that prodigal son arc, and we can get to the prodigal son later in the show, but because it's very key.
Yeah.
But suddenly you become aware, you're eating the food of the pigs, and you start going, what's going on? In this case, in the modernist sense, where I was at coming out of atheism, I didn't have a clear indication. I didn't know what was wrong. I had to almost, your whole entire worldview falls apart, and you kind of have to rebuild it. And you're like, okay, where do we start? And we start examining. I was like, well, if I'm wrong about God, then I'm wrong about reality. So I'm probably wrong about everything else. So maybe what I need to do is to do an audit.
Van Til is calling. Anyways,
right. Let's do the easy thing. Let's do a complete audit on reality itself and see where else I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because I'm probably wrong on some really critical things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, liberalism. So I started to create this, and this actually solidified a great deal after reading Father Seraphim Rose's book Nihilism, which I highly recommend.
Such a good book.
Everyone reads.
Yeah.
In Nihilism, Father Seraphim Rose does this brilliant thing where he posits different forms of nihilism. So nihilism becomes this word concept fallacy. And maybe people are unfamiliar with that term, but it's essentially like, I can say a word and you think you know what the word is. We have a common understanding of the word. However, the word can also mean other things in different contexts, and it really depends. It's context dependent. So oftentimes when I say nihilism, people think of depressed Germans throwing marmots into bathtubs, right? That's where their mind goes.
Yes.
But in actuality,
they're nihilists.
Right, the nihilists. in actuality, nihilism just means nothingness. So anything that substantiates nothingness is nihilism. This can also become considered in terms of vitalisms. They take many different forms. But the ultimate end is there's nothing there. There's nothing grounding it. There's no depth. It's a wading pool. It's a nothing. It's a whizzle. It's a wazzle, right? So just to give an example for people, evolution, and I don't need to get into the debate, but evolution is inherently nihilistic.
Yes, it is.
Because it simply posits the fact that, one, we came from something, not us. We are us for now, and if we check back under their theory in 1 million years, we would not be us. We would have evolved into something else, or de-evolved, or who knows what, right? So that's a nihilistic claim, that everything that you think you are and everything that you do and all sense of meaning is just a temporary speck along a much longer time frame, which gives us, really, if you get serious about that mindset, you're nothing, which means a lot of other thing has a lot of other connotations too. This is the danger of the Vengeful Son, by the way, because now you have this liberal ideology caked into people who are very angry and very confused and looking for answers and don't have any, because they keep all their programming keeps telling them that they are nothing, this world is nothing, their neighbors are nothing, their people are nothing. So it gets really easy to do really bad things to those people.
That's so
right.
That's such a, first of all, that's great, and that's the idea that evolution. This is how I usually phrase it. Darwinian macroevolution applied to the question of human origin produces atrocity. Right.
Exactly.
Because it's just purely materialistic. We are happenstance. There's no more inherent meaning than our existence than if we didn't exist. Therefore, human life doesn't have meaning. Therefore, your life doesn't have meaning. It's ultimately nothing. It's nihilistic, right? And that is the inescapable logical conclusion. And that's why you had Stalin, Mao, and Hitler all were Darwinists. I have a video on my channel about that. Like, the greatest atrocities of the 20th century were all committed by avowed Darwinists. It was central to their we'll call it worldview, even theology. So the anger. So what you're describing is sort of a leftist form of nihilism, which I think has absorbed liberal priors, and it's conflicting with the programming. Is there a sort of a right-wing version as well? Because I'm seeing. Please go ahead.
Here's where my pushback gets involved in this, and especially in the terms of left and right. So,
okay, fair.
I don't have a good pen here. Let me just show this. This is a frame. People are watching. There it is, right? It's a frame. It's a box.
Yeah, that is a box.
That box exists in your mind. It's a category. Okay?
Yeah.
We'll call that category liberalism. Now, liberalism is based, we can also say post-enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
Enlightenment would be the same thing. Liberalism, here's the word concept fallacy for liberalism. I say liberalism, you think left.
Correct.
You think classic liberalism, you think democracies and maybe a little bit of socialism. That's what you think. And then there's all these other things that are not that.
Right. Okay.
Here's my contention. All ideologies born and bred out of post-enlightenment thinking, which distills down to concepts like individualism, nominalism, materialism. All these concepts are core principles in all these ideologies. All these ideologies, therefore, exist inside of a liberal frame. This is also something that Alexander Dugin has talked about in his book, The Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. Not one of his greatest books, but he has one fantastic line that I like to quote a lot, is that he said that basically the entire world has become liberal. Here's a generality, folks. If you look at most of the world's governments, they all kind of look the same. They all function more or less the same. Most countries have some sort of voting system. Even communist China, you can vote. It's, you can choose between the communists and the communists, but it's a vote, right?
Right.
So all of these and all those systems all have their own version of these core concepts.
Okay.
And what Dugin says is that it's nothing personal. You can be anything you want in this world as long as it's liberal. So if we take this core box let's say in this liberal frame, we put all the ideologies: classic liberalism, democracy, socialism, communism, fascism, libertarianism, the list goes on. Okay. That exists in that liberal frame. That liberal frame is Luciferian to its core. All the core principles, virtues, values, whatever you want to call it, of liberalism are inversions of God's virtues.
Okay.
They exalt the passions and suppress the virtues.
Okay.
Massive individualism, right? So materialism, nominalism itself, exclusion of the metaphysical forms and reducing everything down to its material component. So the mind, we don't no longer have a mind. It's a chemical processing unit. that's in somehow in our brain.
Right.
It's a byproduct of our chemical functions.
Right.
I've listened to so many debates this year, and I think this has helped inform my process here as well. I've listened to so many debates from that side, and we can code them left or right. It doesn't matter. It's all within the same box.
Okay.
This is what I keep hearing from people, is you can point out the crazies on the left, and you can even point out some of the crazies on the right, but they're basically coming from the same worldview. None of them are going to willingly abandon nominalism or materialism or what's the other claim, or individualism. Individualism is a big one.
Yeah, it is.
All right, and that is exaltation of the self, pride, vainglory. Boom.
Okay,
there you go.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Right.
Yep.
So because of this inversion, this is the frame. Now, we talk about Hegel and dialectics for a second. Dialectics isn't wrong. It's only right within liberalism. It's sort of like how Marx is right within a conceptual frame of capitalism. So as a critique of capitalism, and so his concepts are a direct critique of capitalism. It doesn't make them workable. It doesn't make them good, or I'm not advocating for them. In fact,
right.
As people hear, I'm trying to break this frame inside people's heads. But within that frame, they're consistent. They make sense within the frame. Hegel's dialectics are a way of examining the frame within the frame. Now you think this is reality. It isn't. But the dialectics keep the frame together. So in order to have these things, you need to have conflict. Liberalism is basically one big giant system of resentment and conflict, unresolved conflicts. Yeah. The more unresolved they become, the more resentment that builds up, because all conflicts beg for a cathartic resolution. Without a cathartic resolution, the conflict just goes away a little bit, but magnifies in the background and stacks and stacks and stacks, along with the contradictions. So I would say this: the distinction right now between left and right, in a general form. I've said that liberalism is essentially the art of stacking mental contradictions on top of each other and letting them sway in the breeze. And as long as they don't topple, you're fine.
Yeah.
The left, we can categorize, has the highest stack of mental contradictions right now. It's why they can't have a conversation anymore without going to verbal abuse or emotional responses. Right. Like within seconds now. I just watched was his name Colonel West, I believe his name is
Colonel West.
Colonel West on a panel with Andrew Wilson.
Oh,
and
dear.
West was yelling and screaming within minutes, and you're like, what is going on?
Andrew brings that out of people, though. Let's be honest, though.
Fair enough, right? Yeah. But it's that insecurity of those contradictions that all you need to do is point it out. And why Andrew's quite good at that is Andrew will point at the contradiction.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Charlie Kirk was really good at doing as well.
Yes.
So the left has the highest stack of contradictions. The right has them too, but the right in general also has religion. And that something about the natural order, which gives them a better foundation for that stack. It's still teetering in the wind, but it has a firmer foundation. And that foundation is being slowly taken away. So
the foundation of religion's being taken away.
Absolutely, because it's being subverted.
Sorry, please continue.
Just briefly. So there's your category, right? Liberalism involves all these, let's say, Enlightenment theories, right? The theories from the Enlightenment that produce these ideologies, which are basically operating systems, IOSs. Yeah. Just briefly to get us to the revolutionary spirit. So what liberalism then produces is this revolutionary spirit, this idea that liberalism has to be introduced and maintained through constant revolution.
Okay.
It works in Britain. This is where it was basically invented. So we had the British revolutions and sort of the upturning of the king into by the merchant classes, etc. It then gets exported to America. It works fairly well in America because, again, that Anglo kind of basis seems to be kind of important to this for any kind of longevity. Gets imported to France. French Revolution, pretty bloody. Jacobins, not so good. Got to get a monarch basically back in through Napoleon, monarch, but not a monarch, to restore order. Goes to Haiti, really bad. But it's being pushed across all of Europe. And then I watch my examination of this is that in the mid 19th century, around 1845 or so, the liberal revolutionaries were kind of surging across Europe, and they got stopped and pushed back in some notable countries like Holland, Germany, and Italy, just to name a few, and Russia, right? Major Christendom countries that Christendom still held a lot of power, and were very monarchical in their construct. Liberalism then goes away. Those revolutionaries get defeated. Many of them get jailed or killed. They go away. They regroup, and they come back with Darwinism,
Yep.
psychologies,
Yep.
all these new inversions of Christianity. Because now the attack isn't just monarchs; it's Christianity itself, which is, I think, has always been the goal.
Yes.
But now it becomes more naked. Now it becomes more of a direct attack and a subversion of Christian ideas and values and virtues. That keeps spreading. We get to the early 20th century, and that's cue the Tyrannical Father. Now, just really briefly, Will and I.
This is great.
So this is where my thinking has evolved. The revolutionary spirit hasn't gone away; it transfers. So, in order to get to God, it has to go through us. So the revolutionary spirit goes through countries and starts to transform, gets rid of the king, transforms our governance, and starts to introduce these ideas that, nationhood and religion and people and cultures are mutable concepts. They're products of this, biochemical process in the brain. That starts to take hold. The next revolution is the category of man, father, dads, tyrannical father. Invert the father, destroy the father, right? Send the men to war, these disastrous wars, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and the one we don't ever really talk about, Korea.
Yeah.
I've been reading a lot into the Korean War. What was done there, I believe the men who came back from that war were no longer men.
Really?
They came back with demons.
What?
It's there some really bad killing fields there. Yeah.
Now okay. So obviously, everything. Everything we've been talking about so far. I don't know. I kind of want to do it today, but can you give me a thumbnail sketch of that? Because I agree with you that there are a lot of wars we don't look at. It's so funny. Just as an aside, we focus on the 1960s very heavily, so we don't pay attention to what was going on in the 1950s. Alfred Kinsey was in the 1950s. The Beat Poets were in the 1950s. Bob Dylan was in the 1950s. The values of the 1960s were being subverted. The American values were being subverted before. We pay attention to the 1940s, so we don't look at the 1930s. Or we pay attention to World War II, so we don't look at World War I. Right? We look so heavily at the 1980s, so we don't look at the 1970s when the groundwork was being laid. In the same way, I think American culture. I remember when I was a kid, it was Vietnam, wall-to-wall Vietnam. Right. The only way that I probably have ever really seriously heard about the Korean War was the TV show MASH, which was a comedy. We won't get into the cross-dressing character who was trying to pretend to be mentally ill, but I know nothing about the Korean War.
You had to go basically back. So one of the better movies about that was set in that time period that kind of named the Korean War was the Manchurian Candidate.
Oh,
right, which is the idea of basically MK Ultra.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
I'll just one story out of the Korean War, and this is where I'm saying that. And I'm still very armchair. I'm still reading more into this as well. But one of the things that really shocked me was learning that the British and American forces didn't make a discernment between Koreans. So at one point there was civilians, let's say South Korean, what will later become South Korean citizens, kind of running from the communists. The communists were pushing them into the line, and the Americans and British just mowed everyone down, killed them all.
Wow. Okay.
So women and children, everything. And we're not talking napalm drop from an airplane like Vietnam. We're talking you could see them.
It's so interesting because when I was doing the Renaissance of Men, I was trying to understand the kind of fathers that the women of the 1960s were reacting to. There was a particular kind of man that they were reacting to. They're the sons as well, but there's a particular kind of man, and the archetype that was always used. And there's a book called Jesus and John Wayne, and it's this idea that the men of that era, the fathers of that era of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, their archetypal hero was John Wayne. He was like their guy, of which like Clint Eastwood was an evolution, but it was like John Wayne. And the defining characteristic of John Wayne is that he wasn't a big talker. He didn't have a lot of like extended monologues in his movies. He was just the reliable guy who showed up and got the job done, would say the minimum number of words, and was kind of the hero. And I was thinking about that, and so what the children of the 1960s said is that their fathers were not there for them emotionally, right? And we can unpack all the psychology around that, but of course there's a bonding characteristic that needs to happen in childhood. I think the boomers probably took it way too far, as they do, but let's just granting there's some legitimacy that dad was unreachable. And what sort of things would make an otherwise healthy man unreachable? I don't know, like mowing down a bunch of Koreans. I don't know, like watching your buddy, like the ball turret gunner. If you've ever read that poem, I highly recommend it. Seeing stuff like that in World War II, after you grew up in the Great Depression, that would make dad pretty quiet. Like we today we would call it PTSD, and maybe that's so, but certainly dad doesn't have a whole lot to say because he's busy fighting off the demons inside himself, right?
In some ways, that distance can be almost seen as a mercy.
Exactly.
Because as we now know through this era of the devouring mother, which we'll now get into, when men are allowed to access our emotions freely and without any restraint at all, bad things happen.
That is absolutely true.
Society falls apart very quickly, right? Men, it's the category of father. So I've just said this recently on a show. I don't want to be my daughter's friend.
Sure.
I'm not my daughter's friend.
That's right.
I'm my daughter's father.
That's right.
It's its own category that comes with very specific duties and responsibilities that, if we want to do some sort of overarching thing, sure, there's some similarities to friendship, but it's distinct, and it has to be distinct so that when my daughter turns to her dad or needs her dad, she knows what that is.
That's right.
And she can turn to her friend and know what that is, or to her mom, or to her, these categories have to mean something.
That's right.
And so to go back to the revolutionary spirit, entering the category of father or man, it revolutionizes that men, it breaks them. So to that point, as I think you're getting to, how do we're talking to young men and we're saying, well, you got to, men have got to do this. And I've heard so much of this stuff. It's making me almost ill, because the way I'm looking at it is like, look, the modeling, we can't even stand firmly on the concept of what it is to be a man anymore at all. None of us. I'm 48 years old. I'm on shaky ground. Right. Because now, luckily, I had my grandfather who came from that 1916 era. He was drafted into the war, but never served on the front lines. He was in the reserves, but he went through a lot of that stuff, and he came from that world, and he was very reserved and very traditional and very Slavic. So there's all those things to unpack. But I mean, I had the benefit of knowing him later on in his life, so he had mellowed, let's put it that way. Sure. But I was raised with stories of him using corporal punishment on my mom and all that kind of stuff. And I think that violence was much more immediate and easily accessible for people in that time period.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's born through, if you read Charles Bukowski and a lot of those writers from that post-war early 50s time period, it was very, very violent. And a lot of men were very angry and didn't have some place to put it, so they go to the Merchant Marines, or there was still access, though, I think, to, let's say, better ways of funneling a young man's energies. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Not perfect, but maybe better. So then we have that transference from the like you said, from the 1950s to the 1960s. Already we're starting to see feminism creep in. And I'm not talking about first wave feminism. I'm talking the devouring mother itself, this overarching feminized spirit, which is the revolution of the mother or of the woman, right? It's inverting there's inverting women. All the virtues of the woman, so the archetype of the divine or blessed mother gets inverted to the devouring mother. The archetype of the wise king gets inverted to the tyrannical father. See where we're going here. So in the 1950s to the 1960s, in that decade, we start to see that transference. I'll give you one little example that I just came up with. In the Honeymooners, you have the patriarchal man who threatens physical violence on his wife all the time. I'm going to smack you, Alice, to the moon, Alice. Yeah. But she and the wives in that show are just as prominent characters as the men, right? They play very important roles in that show. It gets satirized with the Flintstones, and what does Fred cry out at the end of every show? Wilma. The wives play very important roles. They are discernment tools within the shows. Now, that's not in and of itself wrong, but we're starting to see that female archetype that is going to dominate all of media in one way, shape, or form, right? The wise, savvy mother and the sort of dumb, brutal dad, inefficient dad. That archetype starts getting born in the 1950s. Yeah. So even though we have father knows best, right? I love Lucy, right? She's a ditzy, dumb one. She's the star of the show. It's not I love Desi.
That's right.
Right? So you're already seeing the seeds being planted. So by the 1960s and then certainly by the 1970s, we're really seeing it. And it just keeps developing and developing. Archie Bunker. Yeah. Right. Old aging man who's kind of losing his vitality, still holding on to old things. Couldn't say anti-Semitism's on TV, so his son-in-law's a Polak. Right? I get it. Yeah. Trust me, as a Slavic, we like to make fun. We like to make fun of Polish people too, but it's fine.
I haven't heard a good Polak joke in a long time.
Right? There's a dying art, I think. So anyway, we're starting to see those seeds, and that metastasize into this devouring mother, where now, of course, we get to, OnlyFans, and the list goes on. But it's, again, this inversion, this revolution, this destruction of the category of woman. Now we have the final category, which is the category of the child. So in Orthodox, we talk about the Trinity, obviously. We're a Trinitarian.
Heard of
it. Religion. Yeah, kind of big for us. But we've in a lot of Orthodox thinking, there's like, we see the Trinity in all things. So we would say that the family in itself forms a trinity: father, mother, child, right? And child can be many children, but these are categories. It's almost like some people think it's like it's a mini monastery or a mini church kind of ideal, where the father sits as a priest of the house. So if you say we're going to invert them, finally we get to the final category, which is the child, right? The young, the son, the vengeful son.
Oh man.
What have we seen over the last 10 years? Rising violence and desire to tear down categories completely. And this is from left and right, by the way. The right is just doing it in their own way. We'll say the right, and we're going to use those terms. The right's just doing it in their own way, but the left has been on the forefront of this kind of stuff because it's been during their devouring mothers phase, which is, by the way, favors the left, right? It's very feminized. That's very progressive. All the, nature, womb, all this, abortions, all these things are all feminized ideas. Even the idea of mass immigration. Bring your suffering children onto me. I will protect them as I smother them and kill them, as I destroy them, but bring them onto me. I'm the grieved, suffering mother, the martyr mother, right? So we're seeing that transference. And what has been in the news a lot recently? The abuse and let's say sale of children.
Yeah.
And we're going to see more and more of that. There is a darkness that's going to be exposed to the world very soon that I do not think people are ready for.
Say more about that. I think I agree, but I'm not sure was sort of what you're referring to by the. I mean, I know what you mean, obviously, by the sale and abuse of children, obviously, but like,
yeah, Epstein is just a tip of an iceberg.
Oh, okay, you're talking like Whitney Webb type stuff.
I'm not even talking about Whitney Webb because so we're going through an apocalypse. An apocalypse in its classic sense is all things hidden are being revealed. Okay. The truth wants to be revealed. It wants to be told. As Christians, we understand that truth is Christ, literally a man. That's the truth. The truth wants to be expressed. It has to be, right? Lies can only work for so long, and then they kind of almost upend themselves.
Right.
So what's going to come out of it, and I believe this is part of the trap. It's both I have this term I call the bitter white pill, right? So these are hopeful things, these are good things, but they don't taste very good, and you have to be very careful how you apply them. So I think the bitter white pill here about these revelations that we're going to start seeing, Epstein, Diddy, Hollywood, I think is going to be opened up like a can of sardines at some point. Wow. There's a lot of discussions going on. And it's happening faster and faster and faster. I think as people start to examine transgenderisms and who's behind that, and as that becomes more and more investigated, more and more things are going to start coming out. I can only speculate. I know some things. We'll keep that conversation kind of loose for now. But as I've also said, that the army of the Vengeful Son is going to be the transgender kids.
Oh, well, because, I mean, please continue.
So let's make this distinction. There's a distinction between, let's say, the 35-year-old man who would normally be considered a transvestite, who wants to wear a woman's dress and go into a woman's washroom, which is horrible and disgusting and should be stopped, right?
Yeah, of course.
But let's make this other distinction, is that there are 13-year-old kids who've been lied to and deceived and fed puberty blockers. The numbers that I've seen since about 1990, when these drugs really started hitting the market, they've been around even longer than that, but mostly in 1990s when they started being promoted for gender dysmorphia, is over 100,000 people, kids mostly, have received these drugs. That's a small army. That's just in the continental United States, by the way. We're not even talking worldwide sales. And that's of what we know. So if we take 100,000 as a baseline over the last 30 years, but really intensified over the last 10 to 15, you have a lot of kids who have been fed these drugs, and many of them are now starting to confess that they're not working. That is making the situation work. Yeah, the drugs don't work. They're making it worse. They're finding out that they're basically they were developed as castration drugs that they were giving to prisoners who were convicted of rape and pedophilia. So that's what these drugs were originally made for, and now they're just pumping into these kids. So these kids are going to basically find out that they can't have children in the future. This is permanent. This is permanently altering their ability to have sexual pleasure, to have any kind of sexual function whatsoever, especially within the men. So now you have, let's use even a smaller figure. Let's go 20 to 30,000 kids in the continental United States right now who have been lied to, deceived by their parents, by their doctors, by their teachers, by their governments, by every single authority in the world, has deceived them and lied to them and fed them drugs, or perhaps encouraged them to mutilate their bodies. And they wake up one day and they find out they're in a worse place than they were before.
Yeah.
And they're nihilistic and they have nothing to live for. And they live in a country where they can get a gun.
Yeah.
Vengeful Son.
So the revolution finds its climax in the ultimate
destroying the purity of the child.
That's right. The ultimate degree of inversion. You have men who think they're women. You have children whose purity has been ruined in a society of institutions that have lied to them, from social media to medicine to sometimes even their own parents and schools. Everything is inverted, and guns are plentiful. And so you have a child army of terrorist cell foot soldiers. It's not, Chinese troops marching or landing en masse in California. It's not, Russia or whatever. It's not even necessarily like massive aggression, like military aged males, although, I don't mean to minimize the dangers of mass unchecked immigration in the United States or Europe. But the real threat are these totally inverted kids living in an inverted moral world. And you know what? It's really difficult to argue with you right now, particularly considering obviously what happened with Charlie Kirk and the associations of the shooter, Tyler Robinson, his proclivities, and all of the people around him. I'm hearing numbers up to 20 or so people, and organizations that have been funded by the UN appear to be tied to it also, at least tangentially. But you have the transgender shooter from just a week ago of this Catholic church in Minneapolis. You have the transgender shooter from the Presbyterian school in Nashville. Wasn't there a school shooting on the same day as Charlie Kirk as well? That obviously
there was one in Colorado. I don't know the particulars to it. Unfortunately, it got buried pretty quickly.
It did.
I don't know if that's intentional or non-intentional.
Yeah.
But I haven't dug into it, but I would not be surprised if we find either it is a transgendered person or and somehow related to that. The list goes on. Have you ever heard of the Zizians? Zizians?
The what?
Oh yeah. Oh, look into that one.
I don't even know how to spell that.
Zizian. Zizians. Sometimes my French Canadianisms kind of creep in. The Zizian. They're a group, essentially a terrorist group of transgendered people, mostly male to female. And they've been responsible for multiple violent attacks. I think a few murders. Some of the lead guys have been jailed. But yeah, they are a militant transgendered organization, and they're just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so ChatGPT does not know who the Zizians are. But AP News and Wired does. Well, what's really funny is I asked ChatGPT about the Charlie Kirk shooting, and ChatGPT says, my recent data says he's alive. I'm like, your recent data is pretty... Yeah, exactly. This was like, okay, so here's the Guardian. Let's see. Then there's their pop over. Okay, great. So, all right. So let me see if I can share my screen and everyone can check this out. Screen and allow. Okay, great. So here we go. Killings across 3 states shines spotlight on cult-like Zizian group. Police search for member currently on the run from charges linked to homicides across the U.S. Killing of a U.S. Border Patrol agent. A fringe group of radical Berkeley pseudo-intellectuals. That's pretty mean. I don't want to ever be called that. And so if I go back, here's AP News and there's Wikipedia. Delirious, violent, impossible true story of the Zizians. A handful of gifted young tech people. This is Wired, set out to save the world. For years, Wired has been tracking each twist and turn of their alleged descent into mayhem and death. Wow. Okay. So the Zizians. Yeah. Okay. There it is. There it is. There it is. Well, you know what when I say like about it, obviously I don't like any of it, but this makes more sense as framing it than a transgender mental illness issue. By the way, sorry if I sound congested. I'm coming off of a cold. This makes more sense than framing it as a transgender mental illness issue. I do believe that it is that, just to be clear. But when the media, the media that's sympathetic to reality, gets a hold of these Schrödingers, it just tends to say things like, these are mentally ill individuals that are committing crazy acts. And I believe that's true. I don't think that's incorrect or false. But
I think it's completely false. I
well,
think
I
they're
mean, but like
demons.
in the sense of like it's imprecise, right?
They're possessed by demons.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They won't say that because we don't have a category for demon possession in our psychologized materialistic, right? But simply saying
from their worldview, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that there's something wrong with the mental emotional state of these individuals internally, meaning they're not, they're not. I won't say what they're not. That's that, but I think that misses the mark. It's not wrong, but it misses the mark. And what hits the mark is saying, is your thesis, which is these individuals. Yes, of course, there's something very wrong with them, but they are the end product of 250 years of revolution that has been forcing its way through Western culture since Enlightenment, or probably before. It's not like the ideas sprang up out of nowhere during the Enlightenment, right? So, and now here they are. They have produced child assassins, fatherless, motherless child assassins who have no sense of right and wrong, no sense of guilt. No, sociopaths we started talking about, a good way to understand a sociopath or a psychopath is they don't have a conscience. They don't feel that it's, when I do something, that it's wrong. Like, oh, we all get conscience hits. My conscience got hit by that. I need to apologize. Psychopaths, sociopaths don't have that. So here you have the inversion of everything sacred, everything human, everything real tied to, firearms.
I recommend everyone go check out Father Peter Hears. Just recently did a show titled, I believe it was called World War III, the three sins that will lead to World War III. In the Orthodox world, there has been a number of true, let's say, predictions, revelations, and these span back in some cases hundreds of years, but we'll take the more modern cases. There are many monastics who accurately predicted COVID, who have been predicting the most recent one recently, which I actually had a spit take for. The prediction was this. The prophecy was this, that said, brothers, one day you'll wake up and you'll be having your morning coffee and reading the headlines that Israel has struck Iran's nuclear facilities. And this prediction was made, I want to say 20 or 30 years ago. And the day that Israel did that, I woke up and said my prayers and sat down on my computer here and had my coffee and then went to read the news, and I said, Israel struck Iran. And I
right.
Now there's follow-ons to that, and I'll direct people to go check out Conrad Franz, who's a friend of my show. His channel World War Now has been doing fantastic work on this, and I definitely someone you should pay attention to. Father Peter Hears also did this show and talking about many of the predictions, prophecies laid out by numerous saints, like Elder Ephraim of Arizona, Generisa of Galatica, who is not a saint, but she's considered a blessed mother. So in these predictions, and I won't read the whole predictions. It's predicting a great world war. Now, whether that world war will be what we've seen before in World War I or World War II, or be like a series of global conflicts that are much maybe more contained, like Russia, Ukraine, but they'll be all over the place. And one of the predicting causes of this, actually, I'll read from this really briefly. I've said this on the show as well, so if people want to get more of a deep dive, go check out some of the recent work I've done on Mironchuck Live, and I'll be speaking more of this in detail in the coming weeks. So this is from Metropolitan Neophytos, who is the Metropolitan of Crete. Metropolitan tells a story that he heard from Saint Jacob himself. Saint Jacob went to venerate the relics of Saint John the Russian on the island of Evia, and he began to speak to the saint. Saint John told him that many pilgrims come to venerate his relics, but few believers. People today are full of disrespect and lack of faith, and therefore, to fix this world, there must be a war. Saint Jacob was scared of these words, and noting how tragic the history of the 20th century already was, he asked, do we really need another war? But St. John replied, a war must begin, otherwise mankind won't change. Metropolitan Neophytos explains that he was a student when he heard this from St. John, and when he asked him why St. John asserted this, St. Jacob said, because the Lord revealed to him, it's because the next generation won't give birth to normal, ordinary children, but to demonic children.
Oh.
Now, Metropolitan Neophytos is now currently I would say, is somewhere in his 70s. So we're talking this conversation would have happened maybe about 50 odd years ago. Okay. So you start thinking Generation X and on up. There we start seeing this. There was an interesting survey put out recently, just as a connective tissue to this, where they asked different generational categories what if they thought the question was, is political violence ever justified? And the boomers, boomers replied in the negative, like 80 or 90%. Gen X a little bit lower. Let's say if boomers were 90, then Gen X would be in the high 80s. Millennials, we start getting into the 70s, and by Generation Z, we're getting into like barely over 50%.
Yeah.
Right. So when he says they won't give birth to normal children, but to demonic children, that doesn't mean like pointed ears or something like that. It means dead souls.
Yeah.
In this sense. So people who are born without the ability to pursue sainthood. And I'll just read one more quote from here. And he didn't name any other reasons. Metropolitan Neophytos emphasizes, and the saints whom I mentioned a little earlier all say the same thing, that the coming generations, if the Lord does not intervene, won't be the image and likeness of God. They will be in the form of man, but in essence with a dead soul. Such a person cannot become a saint. If a society and humanity can't give birth to saints, then there is no point in living.
Okay.
So there is your end game. And
so
and where we're at. And so when you connect this idea to this revolution of the child, right? So now we're seeing generations of people being born with dead souls, and even those who are not born with dead souls their souls are being attacked and trying to be deadened in this life.
Okay.
And the only corollary to this, so as I said, the tyrannical father is an inversion of the wise king. The devouring mother or the smothering mother is an inversion of the blessed mother. The vengeful son is an inversion of the prodigal son.
Okay, so the prodigal son actually returns and comes to his senses. The vengeful son, yeah, go ahead.
Right. The prodigal son has humility. How do you defeat the devil? With humility. It's one thing Satan doesn't have. So integral to the story is the prodigal son leaves his father's house with vainglory and pride to strike out on his own, falls and misspends his inheritance, is brought low. There's an awareness. Suddenly he becomes aware of his situation. And he becomes aware that he's being mistreated, that he's eating the food of the pigs. And he said, well, I should return to my father's home, even as a servant, because my father treats even his servants better than this. So out of humility, the son returns.
Okay.
And is embraced by the father. I won't recount the whole story.
Of course.
But I've distilled it down to to basically 3 words. And this is sort of the motif of the prodigal son and what I hope people will model and do in this world. And I think this is happening with or without my words on this, is we return to the Father to repent of our sins and rebuild. Rebuild ourselves, rebuild the church, rebuild Christ in this world, rebuild our nations, rebuild our families, rebuild our categories, rebuild Christendom in this world. Rebuild and create, and hopefully it's a generational project, but hopefully get to a point where we're producing saints.
So, so the pattern, amen, hallelujah to all of that. So the pattern is of the generation producing demonic children. This sort of prophecy is something that can be averted. meaning like it's sort of a prediction in a sense of the way that things are going, but we can bring souls back to life?
I don't believe that things can be averted. Now, again, you're asking some questions that are outside of my ability to answer. So I would say, go check out Father Peter Shears' work and maybe direct some questions to some learned Orthodox priests, because that's outside my purview. But from my understanding, it's this: it's the same thing with, like, let's say, the eschaton, the end of the world.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We don't know when it's going to happen, and we don't know how it's going to happen. Well, we know, in generalities.
Sure.
What from my understanding, is that our prayers can keep it can sort of almost, forgive me for saying this, can basically kick the eschaton down the road a little bit. So devotion prayers, true repentance, true devotion to God does have effects, and not just on us, but people around us, and can, let's say, bring God back into our societies, which will again stave off certain things. In terms of, and again, this is down to my understanding, in terms of certain things like this World War prediction, and I think many of the things that are already happening and will intensify very quickly now. You can look at the bond markets in Europe. You can look at all these other factors. These things are inescapable. They're happening. We're caught in that gravity well. The only thing that we can do effectively is shore up our defenses, which is return to the church.
Yeah.
Whatever denomination, whatever church you go to, you go and you apply. You put your full heart into it. Now is the time to pray.
Okay.
We'll make the distinction here. And this is something I'm just really learning, and it's an easy thing to fall into. Christ can remain on the lips really easily. You can say things and really mean them. They're true. They're absolute truths, and you really mean what you're saying. Excuse me. But it's not here. It's not in the heart yet.
Yeah.
And it sometimes takes a little time to really get to the heart. And when it does, you'll notice a difference. So Christ on the lips, no good. Christ in the heart is where we need to be. And I see signs of this everywhere. Not just, enrollment numbers or people inquiring numbers and catechism numbers and all the rest of it in the Orthodox Church. I know this is happening all over the place, especially after Charlie Kirk. I've just seen in walls of this, of young men, especially, saying, yeah, I'm going to church again.
Yeah.
If 2020 didn't get you, 2025 definitely is.
Yeah.
And that's very encouraging, because I think if there is, to try to answer your question as best as I can, if there is any way to minimize, right, the disastrous effects, it can only be through God.
Yeah. Okay.
Only God can save us, essentially, which is always true. But it's basically, it's like suffering. You say suffering brings you closer to God. Well, you're about to find out how close to God you are, because we're going to go through some suffering. Yeah. And I think now it's unavoidable. Mimetically speaking, the violence is going to increase.
Okay.
And we can say, oh, from this side or that side or both sides, sure. But mimetically speaking, the violence is going to increase, because that's what it does.
So I think that I agree with a lot of this. I agree with the overall perspective and frame. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing in response to the pressure that has been taking place from 2020 onwards, sort of culminating with, what happened a week ago with Charlie Kirk, is there has been a turn to the church, or to Christianity broadly, whether Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, etc. Like there does seem to be a move happening of both young men and young women who are rejecting the nihilism that they've been taught and are returning to the environment where the truth can be preached to them, whether it will reach their heart, whether they will ultimately, confront the liberalism within themselves and cast that off in order to be saved, in order to truly adopt the faith. I suppose we'll see. But one of the things I'm definitely observing, although it's, I guess, I don't know. I was going to say it's hard to tell, because am I in my little algorithmically curated content bubble, and am I only seeing the things that feed my preconceived notions? But I don't think I actually am. I might be. I suppose I would have to see some actual survey numbers. But things are coming across my feed of singing in the New York subway, like singing hymns in the New York subway. And I know that we talked about catechumen numbers for the Orthodox Church, and I know that my denomination, the CREC, is experiencing growth that it almost can't keep up with. And Christianity is certainly reaching to some of the highest heights of politics. In fact, J.D. Vance's speech, I think it was yesterday or Monday, he recited the Nicene Creed in his speech to the nation. Like, I was in my car, I was driving, and I was yelling, like, "Let's go!" just to hear J.D. Vance say, yeah, he wasn't interrupting a regularly scheduled broadcast on the major news networks to do it. And yet still, that here's the Vice President of the United States, citing the Nicene Creed and the Apostle Paul in the same speech, without getting a hitch in his throat about it, or full-throated. I think that really means something. And so I look at these trends, which I agree are real. I think the trend to AI, I think the market being propped up by debt, inflation, right? Like the impending potential population collapse, across the world, in terms of, one of the consequences of low birth rates and feminism. I think all these things are real. And I think they and others point to some cataclysmic transformative event. And I also see really the possibility for revival. I think those are our choices, like revolution or revival, revolution / collapse or revival. And I think that's really cool. I guess just because, 5 years ago, I was like, oh yeah, like let me start stocking up on all my emergency collapse supplies. I could tell stories about that. But now I do see that persecution from the wider culture, institution, government, whatever, is leading to a resurgence of faith. So maybe this fate can be avoided.
I think it can be. I think it can be minimized.
Okay.
The prediction of maybe the spirit of the Vengeful Son especially is that it's going to affect everyone.
Okay.
It's going to affect everyone, everything. Tyrannical father, devouring mother. I say these terms. I give them a bracket. Everyone goes, right, and you go, agreed. So then I can say the spirit. Then I say the Vengeful Son, and everyone's ears perk up. And this is what I became aware of this late last year, so I had to kind of back off a lot, and really have a rethink about this and represent it in a different way, because we became aware of people glomming onto this and trying to position it as a good thing. Like, oh yeah, Vengeful Son, yeah, good. I'm like,
let's go.
No.
Not what I mean. Yeah.
This is not Jason. This is not going to be Jason forming a new Proud Boys kind of chapter. No. Right. And not just for my own personal brand and safety, but I also see the danger in that, because as I've said, the problem with the Vengeful Son is it's going to feel good. So this gets us into the idea of violence within, let's say, even Christianity. And most people say, we want justice, we want righteousness. I'm like, that's great. Here's what you need then is go to church, talk to a priest, and submit to the church. Because your ability to discern between vengeance and justice is gone now. We don't have the moral breaks. I'm 48 years old. I think I'm a decently intelligent human being.
I agree.
I've had successes and all those others. I have a house and all these other things. And in terms of spiritual knowledge, or let's say, even if we really want to get down to it, even like moral frameworks, I'm a child. I'm having to relearn entire swaths of things and put them into new context, because I have to realize that I was wrong for a very, very, very long time. And by the grace of God, I had, the veil taken from me and was able to change things. But like, hey, I'm still in that process. So for me to then say, oh, I know when and what this is. And if I'm going to, let's say, if, or just not me, but hypothetical person is going to use violence in a just way, and even let's say that's possible, that's great. When do you know when to stop?
That's right.
And let's give you even a better magic here. We'll even say that you're a great person and you know when to stop. The problem is you're modeling this to everyone around you.
Yeah.
So then it beggars the question, well, even if you know when to stop, does everyone else? Does the mob know when to stop? No. And we know that because we know what the mob did with Christ.
Right.
And we know that the devil walks within them. So when we think about it in those frames, it's not that you don't defend yourself, or it's not that there may be times in the future when certain actions are going to happen because they're going to happen because it's going to be brought to you. And if the war is on your front lawn, you're going to have to respond in some way, right? And I'm not going to advise anyone on that. It's down to you and your situation, right? The thing is that if you're not preparing before that, and you're not trying to learn that discernment and gain that wisdom and have that access to tradition, and at least prepare yourself spiritually and mentally for that occasion. I'm not saying live in fear and anxiety. I'm just simply saying, like, if you want to walk the royal path, if you want to have justice in your life and be able to do justice and true righteousness, well, you got to learn what those things are.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to live those things. You think it's got to be in your heart. You got to love your enemy, love them, radical love, and that doesn't mean condone them. And that doesn't. And when you say even forgive them, it doesn't mean that we buy them a house and let them set up shop next door, right? It means we love and forgive them so much that we know we have to discipline them. We have to reorganize them, bring them back into order.
Right.
And, however that happens, or whatever methods that have to be used, we have to be very, very careful because everything now is on a precipice.
Mm-hmm.
Every single decision we make, and like I said when we started off this conversation, Matthew Erickson said, we live in this luminous time. All things are potential, but any one decision right now could shoot us off down a path that we're going to be on for 60 to 120 years.
Right.
And our children will inherit. So that's the weight of responsibility is on you. Is it fair? No, but it's your responsibility. Pick up your cross, go to church, talk to a priest.
Yeah. Amen. Hallelujah. Everyone stand up and applaud that. Because I fully agree. And you said so many things using some of the same words that I do, but you said it in your own way, like brakes on the train. How many men, young or old, being young, like under 20, or old, like up to 50 in some cases today, have brakes on their train? They get a little bit of some idea that they saw on the internet, and then they go cruising off down this road, and suddenly they're anti-Semitic and everything is a lie, and they're tearing their own lives apart. Like, pump the brakes, bro. Like, learn to do that. Not seeing that. The predominance of feelings, like, it feels good. Yeah, absolutely. Surrendering to your passions, surrendering to your flesh feels good. That doesn't make it right. And the same guys that would critique, women for being so feeling centric, they give into their feelings, but not feelings of like sadness or grief. They give into feelings of anger, which is just as much an emotion, but that is somehow okay. And then you have the mistaking vengeance for justice. Like, no, just because it feels good when you do it doesn't mean that it's actual justice. And who are you to deal in death and judgment? As I recall, like Lord of the Rings, I think that's Gandalf who says that in the Lord of the Rings. And I appreciate you saying all this, because I say all this in my own little corners and I get such serious pushback for that. Like, it's okay, good. So you get it too. And it's like, yeah,
my friend.
Okay.
Ooh, my channel would be at least 3 times the size if I had learned to shut up about a year ago, or if I had just gone along and said, okay, yeah, okay, played a few games, but I'm me, and I'm incapable of doing such things.
Yeah.
So
same.
I look, I'm, on a personal note, and this is actually kind of one of the things that softened me to the church and led me to my spiritual awakening, was I realized that I was struggling with the passion of wrath, that I have an anger in me,
Yeah.
and it's an embarrassing anger, because it comes out of you and you realize you have there's an Australian slang I like to use. It's called "spit the dummy," and dummy is slang for a pacifier. So it's like a toddler having a tantrum, and a man who can't control his anger or his emotions ain't no good. So that's something to keep in mind, is that when you address these things, you have to understand that, especially, let's say, anger. Well, online, anger is wonderful. It's promoted. There's entire channels. You can make a lot of money on YouTube by being the angry guy.
Oh yeah. A smart angry guy too.
Oh my goodness. Or inciting anger in others. Glory, right?
Yeah.
And there's time and place for everything. So this is not a critique to anyone or anything, because I can't critique, because I suffer from it too. But it's become that awareness. Okay, so you're aware that there's a sickness in me. I have a spiritual sickness, and that is, from the Orthodox perspective, that is what the church is. The church is a hospital. You go there when you're sick. You have a passion. You have something playing on you that is, and we all do. All of us. All sins come from the passions. We can imagine the passions of the addictions that spawn sin in the world, because we do things to feed the passions. The Catholics would understand this like the 7 deadly sins. Pride, vainglory, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, and there's a few others there as well. Misplaced honor. Sometimes it's false honor. So these are inversions of the virtues of God. So these are, what keeps us of the world. This is when we say in Orthodoxy, you want to bring death to the world. Well, we can talk about the passions individually, or we can talk about them collectively. And when we do, it's the world. So when we say we bring death to the world, we're deadening the passions. We're saying that these passions will no longer have control on us. So normal situations where you get angry, you don't get angry anymore. It toughens the skin.
That's right.
To the point where it's the armor of God kind of reference, where you're no longer affected by these things. It's the flesh that cries out for comfort. It's often the flesh that brings us to the passions or leads us to sin, because we want our comfort. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to fast. We don't want to get up early and pray. Oh, I want to go to sleep early. I forgot my prayers. Oh, it's okay. I'll catch up on them next week. Oh, I don't want to go to church. It's raining. Oh, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
It's the flesh. The flesh keeps us weak. The flesh wants the world, and then wants a very nice, comforting world. And Lucifer will give that to you. The demons will give all that to you and more.
Yeah.
Just go to sleep. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
As they eat you. Because that's what they want. They want to eat you. And they don't care what team you're on, and they don't care who you vote for, and they don't care how much money you have or how much money you want or any of those things. They just want to eat you and do as much damage to you and into generations as possible, because that's the only way they can think of. They know how this is going to end. But so on their way out, they're going to do as much damage as possible. And that's us.
Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, right?
Big fan.
And The Great Divorce as well. And, it's so funny because when I had started this question, I asked the question earlier about right-wing violence, and it's all, and you explained how it's all within the liberal frame. That's kind of what I was getting at is, these individualistic young men who think that their own anger is legitimized in Christianity, whether they think of themselves as crusaders, or they lean too heavily on the imprecatory psalms, to love God is to hate evil and all this different stuff. And they try to see the Lord reflected in their own image. And it's ultimately just surrendering to their own passions and trying to, find a proof text for it. And it's so tiring, trying to explain, brother, there's a better way in the faith that you have to let go of. Please go ahead.
Put it this way. I don't know if you're familiar with the term Phronema. It's a Greek term.
Yes, it's a popular Eastern Orthodox term, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
It's a multi-use word, as many of these Greek terms are.
Yes.
Many people translate it to worldview, but it's bigger than that. it essentially, if we're trying to give it a full definition, it would be a state of being. So when we say that I develop or I have a orthodox, in this case Phronema, I have an orthodox state of being. So what I'm trying to do is incorporate orthodoxy into into everything I do.
Sure.
Right. So I don't just believe in something; I am it, and that is a much different kind of category than just I believe in something, I read it, I agree with it.
Yes.
Ideologies are not phronemas. They cannot be. An ideology is, and this is why it's a lie. And liberalism is just an ideology machine. An ideology can tell you or try to instruct you on how to think about, materialism or economics or political structures, et cetera, et cetera. What an ideology can't tell you what to do is how to raise your child, or what to do when your dad dies, or how to address a problem in your marriage or a conflict at work. It can't do that. They'll try to, and you see this happening in the last 60 years. We've seen the rise of the HR departments, which is trying to use classic liberalism. We'll just say that, or just liberalism in general. We won't start picking in too many fights.
Right.
We're trying to use that liberal frame to try to police behavior, but it doesn't work. Right. There's all these as soon as they start doing that, they just create a new contradiction.
That's right.
Onto a previous held liberal belief that now has to be dealt with or just built upon on top of each other, and so on and so on and so on and so on until it collapses.
That's right. I like this term phronema. The Greek, didn't realize it was a Greek word. One of the ones that I've been reading about lately is paideia, which is very closely related to the verse, bring your children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I believe the training and admonition of the Lord. I believe the word training or nurture is paideia in the original Greek, and I like the way that Phronema frames the idea that there is a point past which your beliefs are not merely things that you hold in your head. They're things that you act out in your being, that you think and you speak and you manifest into reality through your actions, and then they become you. And what's so funny is I did, without even referencing this term, I just wrote an article for Fight Laugh Feast magazine. My listeners will know what that is, for the upcoming conference. That was essentially that idea about how anti-Semitism is in itself a phronema. The Jews are the source of all evil, takes men over, and it can't be kept in this kind of safe zone inside your mind. It works its way out into your thoughts, into your words, into your actions. And that takes you, and I lay this out in the article, it takes you in an opposite direction of the Christian faith. You have to choose, because that phronema is mistaken and anti-biblical, but without the precision of that word to say, no, this is what you are, this is what you have become, which stands in opposition to the phronema of a Christian. What does that look like? In fact, there's a book called by Henry Blameyers, I think it's called The Christian Mind, something like that. It's a popular book in Protestant circles, or it was at one time. And so that's sort of like how to live. People on my side will say thinking Christianly is the way they'll say. Well, they'll use the term worldview, which to an extent has an imprecision in it, because you're talking about, no, this is what you are. It's not just what you think. It's not just what you believe. It's what you practice and embody and that you live out. Are you a Christian? Do you have a Christian phronema? I like that quite a bit.
The danger with a lot of these terms, I'm going to be very, very careful how I say this, because it can be misconstrued.
Of course.
The danger with a lot of these terms is we live in an inverted world.
Yes.
Jonathan Pajot. Okay.
Yes.
And word concept fallacies abound. So there's a term anti-Semitism. Right. We understand what that word is. We understand the connotations. We live in an inverted world, right? So, and this is where I'm being very careful when I say,
of course,
because there are connotations that I'm trying not to make. But it would be possible for some to invert that term into basically a different version of Antichrist. So So instead of saying Antichrist, they're saying anti-Jew.
Okay.
And it becomes inversions. So inversions with inversions. So you
Sure.
have to be, and this
I'll
is
have to
not
think
to
about
cast,
that.
this is not to cast a pale on all people using the word, but you have to then be very careful and examine who's using
Oh,
what and
I
why,
see. Yeah, of course. Of course.
right?
Yes, yes.
It's even when you get to the idea of what is Israel, who is Israel, biblically, historically, in the world today, etc., just to name one. And I don't, I try to avoid this subject as much as possible because it's, again, above my pay grade.
Right.
And I live in Australia, so I have to be very careful about what I say because it can be misconstrued. But I'm just to put it out there, um, for consideration, just be mindful of words.
Absolutely.
Because they're being used quite often against people.
That's
Because
right. Yep.
we're inversions, and it takes that. I think this is the difficulty of these conversations. There's I mean, we'll end with this. We're in this age of the Vengeful Son, this age of total violence. People are becoming aware of there's been lies, deceits, deceptions abound. When we get there's going to be an energy and an impetus to burn it all to the ground. If we see a lie in one category, therefore we assume lies in all categories, and all people who have been saying this are now liars, right? Are now enemy. This is where the discernment comes in. And I can't speak to it to everyone listening to this. So like I said, go to church, talk to your priest. But one thing we talked about earlier before the show began is that about ideologies within the church. And again, I can't speak to everyone's experience. I know from what I've heard from various church fathers, Orthodox church fathers, the idea is that ideologies die in the church, simply because the truth of Christ. If you're truly encountering Christ in your church, then your ideology will fall away. Maybe not immediately. Maybe it takes time, or maybe you'll just drop out because the ideology has too much of a grip on you. You want to keep your ideology. You don't really want Christ, so you'll bounce out of the church. Yeah. Either way, generally speaking, it's very difficult. I'm not saying impossible, but very difficult to hold ideologies within a space where Christ is.
That's right.
So, yeah, of course, everyone, vigilance, patience, discernment, but there's also hope. And I think if we are so energized and interested in certain directions, we will ignore other things. And I think those other things are really what we should maybe be paying more attention to.
I agree. Pursuing the classical virtues, pursuing Christ, pursuing sanctification, true holiness. These are, if we're going to do anything at all in response to this moment as men and women, we should be doing that. That is a guaranteed universal. It's not just based on what time it is. That's been true for 2,000 or more years. And so what is the response to hard times is you get yourself to church. What is the response to good times is you get yourself to church. And you find that it provides what you need, the spiritual food, the spiritual sustenance to conform us to the image of Christ. And there's where we find the peace that passes understanding and the fruits of the Spirit. And those are always, always wonderful things to embody.
Absolutely. Amen.
Amen. Well, Jason, you have given me a lot to think about. I think you've given the audience in a really good way, because I think your theory, your framework has real historical grounding and real explanatory and predictive power, and it feels like a clearer way to get to see and get handles on what's going on in this moment. So, thank you for developing the thesis, and I appreciate you being willing to share it with us today.
My pleasure.
So where would you like to send people to find out more about you and what you do?
Mironchuck Now. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, X, most of the podcatchers. I've also been starting to stream on Kick for those who want more of a live stream experience and without all the ads and all that kind of stuff. So you can find me on most platforms, especially on X. Reach out and say hi if you have any questions, concerns, or you just want to tell me how wrong I am. I'm used to it by now. It's okay. Or how right I am. That would be a nice change. Tell me how right I am. It's nice. That's I am fighting my passions of pride and vainglory, but sometimes you can feed the fight. Sometimes I need something to fight against. Please feed. So we have 3 shows, weekly show with Jim Jatras, my friend and colleague. He's a retired U.S. diplomat and a policy advisor to the Republican Senate, which is so he's very, very learned. He sat on the Russian desk for quite a long time. So we talk about the Russia-Ukraine war and many other geopolitical and spiritual topics as well. So he's a fellow Orthodox Christian, so you can check that out. That's usually aired on Tuesdays. I have an interview show called At the End of the Day. It was on a bit of a hiatus, but it has returned. So we'll have weekly shows coming up. We just really put out one last week. I believe I'm looking at Sundays around 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for new episodes. And then Mironchuck Live is a live streaming show. About usually 1 to 2 of those a week, and they can run anywhere between 3 to 6 hours long. So buckle up. Those will also be available on audio platforms as well. So lots of ways of enjoying the content. Thank you again, Will. My pleasure, man, for being on your show. It's always an honor. I enjoy speaking to you quite a great deal. So we'll hopefully do this again sometime soon.
Amen, brother. Thank you so much. Very grateful for you. May God bless the fruits of your labors.